Hello and welcome back. It is February 2026. I was looking through the major papers this morning, the Times, the Post, the big European dailies.
Yeah.
It's all the usual stuff. Election cycles, tech stocks, celebrity noise. But if you just shift your gaze a little to where the real strategic friction is happening, the map is just lighting up in East Africa.
It's flashing red, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's great to be here. And you're absolutely right to point out that disconnect.
Yeah.
While most people are looking one way, the Horn of Africa has almost quietly become this huge geopolitical chessboard. And we're not talking about local skirmishes. We're talking Turkey, the U.S., Israel, Egypt, all making very significant, very heavy moves in just the last 2 weeks.
And that's exactly what we're here to unpack. We're going to take a calm, professional look at these shifting events. But before we get into the heavy machinery and the diplomatic cables, I do want to mention that this deep dive is brought to you by our sponsor, ProWave AI. And crucially, the intelligence brief that powered today's whole discussion was generated by Stylo News.
And Stylo News is, it's a fascinating tool for anyone who might not know it. It's the consumer version of a software called Stylo Intel Ops.
Right.
And that's the engine that's designed for enterprise operations. So think government agencies, military logistics, high-level business intelligence.
So what you're saying is we're looking at this whole situation through the same kind of lens that global decision makers are using right now.
Exactly. It helps cut through the noise to see the patterns.
Okay, well, speaking of patterns, let's start with the most visible one, hard power. I was reading the brief, and usually when we talk about modern conflict in this region, we're talking about drones.
Unmanned, quiet.
Quiet, efficient surveillance.
Yeah.
But that's really changed this week, hasn't it?
It has changed dramatically. I think the era of just quiet surveillance is over. We are seeing a major surge in heavy military hardware. And the most striking development is from Turkey. For years, Turkey's been a partner to Somalia, building things, training police, providing their Bayraktar drones. But this week, they deployed F-16 fighter jets to Mogadishu.
Okay, let's pause there. F-16s. That is a completely different beast than a drone.
Oh, completely.
A manned supersonic combat aircraft. So why? Why the escalation?
Well, it's partly about capability, yes, but it's really about intent.
Intent.
Yes. I mean, think about it. When you deploy manned aircraft, you are putting your own pilots, your people, in harm's way.
Right.
And that signals a level of commitment that, drone warfare just doesn't have. This is all part of Turkey's blue homeland doctrine, this idea of projecting power far beyond their borders to secure their interests.
So by putting F-16s on the tarmac in Mogadishu, they're essentially turning Somalia into a forward operating base.
A forward operating base for power projection into the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea. They're signaling to everyone, including Western powers, that they see themselves as the primary security guarantor for the Horn.
So they're saying, we are here and we're not leaving.
Exactly. We're dug in. It's a deterrent to al-Shabaab, of course, but it's also a message to other nations that the security architecture in Somalia now speaks Turkish.
And Turkey's not the only one pouring concrete. The United States is making a massive move right next door in Kenya. The brief mentions a $70 million investment to expand the Manda Bay Air Base. Now that name, Manda Bay, it rings a bell.
It should, unfortunately. That was the site of a very serious, a very deadly al-Shabaab attack back in January 2020.
That's right.
They breached the perimeter, destroyed aircraft, and killed American and Kenyan personnel. It was a huge wake-up call.
So this $70 million, this isn't just for a fresh coat of paint?
Oh, not at all. This is about hardening the target and expanding its reach through extending the runway, upgrading hangars to support larger aircraft, more frequent flights.
And the goal?
The goal is to enhance counterterrorism and, this is key, improve the ability to launch over-the-horizon airstrikes into Somalia. So you have Turkey building a fortress in Mogadishu and the U.S. reinforcing its own fortress in Lamu.
That is a lot of firepower concentrating in a very small area. But then there's Uganda, which seems to be playing a completely different game. On one hand, you have celebrations. On the other, threats of leaving. What's going on there?
It's a classic case of mixed signals, really. It's driven by domestic politics and, budget disputes.
Okay.
So on one side, President Museveni just honored his son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, with a very high honor for his leadership in anti-terror missions. It's a public validation of their military engagement.
But then came the warning about a withdrawal.
Right. Almost in the same breath. Uganda warned they might pull their troops out of Somalia by late 2026. The issue here is money. These African Union missions rely heavily on international funding.
So Uganda is basically saying if the funding isn't guaranteed, they can't stay indefinitely.
That's the signal. And if they do leave, that creates a huge problem.
What a vacuum.
A massive vacuum. The Somali National Army is rebuilding, yes. We saw them successfully neutralize a senior al-Shabaab finance official just a few days ago, but replacing seasoned Ugandan troops overnight, that's a logistical nightmare.
So that's the hardware, the jets, the troops. Let's shift to the software, I guess, diplomacy. Because there was one event in the last 2 weeks that really seemed to upset the apple cart.
You must be talking about Israel's unilateral recognition of Somaliland's sovereignty.
That is the one. And I think we need to be really careful here to explain the geography because this is about more than just a flag. Why is this such a big deal?
Well, to understand this, you really have to look at the map. Somaliland is a northern region that declared independence from Somalia decades ago. It functions like a country. It has its own currency, elections.
But nobody officially recognizes it.
Nobody. Until now.
So why does Israel care? I mean, is this just about making a new friend on the block?
It's about the Red Sea. Somaliland sits right on the edge of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
The choke point for global shipping.
Exactly. With all the instability in Yemen, the Houthi threat, Israel is looking for friendly ports, for a security buffer. By recognizing Somaliland, they hope to get a strategic foothold to secure their maritime lifelines.
And for Somaliland, this is the breakthrough they've been chasing for 30 years. They get legitimacy.
Correct. President Abdullahi and Hargeisa sees this as the path to finally getting international investment security partnerships. He's basically saying to the world, we are stable, we're democratic, come do business with us.
But for the government in Mogadishu, this is.
It's an existential crisis. The federal government of Somalia, along with the African Union and Egypt, they see this as a direct violation of territorial integrity. They see Somaliland as a province, not a country.
And Egypt has been very vocal about this. I saw the Egyptian foreign minister has gotten involved.
Heavily involved. Foreign Minister Badr Abdel Ati has been strengthening ties with both Somalia and Kenya to try to counterbalance this move.
Wow. What's their stake?
For Egypt, it's also about the Nile and their regional rivalry with Ethiopia, who has also been getting friendly with Somaliland. So Egypt is stepping in to back Mogadishu, effectively saying, we will protect your unity to keep our rivals in check. It's a proxy struggle.
It really just shows how interconnected all of this is. It's not a local dispute, it's a global checkpoint. And speaking of global institutions, even the UN weighed in this week.
Yes, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres made some very pointed comments on February 17th at the AU summit. He called the lack of a permanent African seat on the Security Council indefensible.
Indefensible. That's a strong word for a diplomat.
It is, and it really frames this whole struggle. Whether it's Somaliland or funding for troops, there's a growing frustration that these big decisions are being handled by external powers, by Turkey, the U.S., Israel, and not by African nations having the final say.
Which actually leads us perfectly into our next segment, because this is the part of the brief that really surprised me. We've just spent all this time talking about how fragile Somalia is. That drought, insurgents, foreign jets. But on the diplomatic stage, they're having a moment.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? At the exact same time they are fighting for their survival, Somalia was just elected to the African Union Peace and Security Council for the 2026-2028 term.
Wait, so the country that has been the subject of security meetings for 2 decades is now running the meeting.
That's it, precisely. They are now sitting at the head of the table. It symbolizes a transition, or at least an attempt at one, from that failed state narrative to a state that's reclaiming its voice.
And on the ground, we're seeing other signs of normalization, too. We talked about the military buildup in Kenya. There's also commercial development. Kenya just announced the reopening of the Mandara border crossing in April.
Which is huge. That border has been closed for nearly 15 years.
15 years. That is a whole generation. Why open it now?
It's about economics. The closure was a security measure, but it just choked off all trade and it divided communities. The reopening is mostly about the trade of mira or khat, which is a huge cash crop there.
So it's an admission that you can't keep a border sealed forever.
Exactly. You have to manage the risk to allow for economic life to return. It's a cautious step toward normalcy, even with F-16s flying overhead.
So we have the high politics and the ground level economics. But we can't talk about this region without talking about the people. And this is where the picture gets much darker.
This is where the reality is just harshest. While we're all discussing fighter jets and treaties, the environment is dealing a devastating hand. We are looking at a severe drought across northeastern Kenya and Somalia.
The numbers in the brief are just staggering. Over 2 million people facing hunger.
And massive livestock deaths. You have to understand, for pastoralist communities, livestock isn't just property, it's their bank account, their food source, their culture. When the herds die, the entire community structure can collapse. It's a classic example of climate change acting as a threat multiplier.
A threat multiplier.
Right. When people lose everything and can't feed their families, they become desperate. And who is waiting there with food and money?
Extremist groups.
Extremist groups like al-Shabaab. The drought does the recruiting for them.
And if that wasn't enough, there's a health emergency on top of it all.
Yes, a surge of Tala-Azar, or visceral leishmaniasis. In Mandera County, Kenya, cases have more than doubled from 2024 to 2025.
And what's driving that spike?
Again, it's environmental. Climate change is expanding the habitat of the sandflies that carry the disease. It's just a stark reminder that national security isn't just about soldiers, it's also about public health.
I want to pivot to a story that bridges the U.S. and the Horn. And I have to admit, when I saw this in the Stylo feed, I had to read it twice. It sounds like a movie plot, but it's apparently happening in the American Midwest.
It does sound like one. Senator Ted Cruz led a hearing recently on a staggering fraud scandal in Minnesota. We are talking about $9 billion in welfare fraud.
Right, $9 billion. With a B.
$9 billion, an immense sum. And here's the kicker. The intelligence presented at the hearing suggests a big chunk of that money wasn't just buying luxury cars, it was funneled directly to Mogadishu.
So, American taxpayer money, meant for families in Minnesota, is potentially funding the very insurgents the U.S. military is fighting.
That is the allegation from the hearing, and it just illustrates how transnational this conflict really is. You can't just look at the battlefield in Lamu. You have to look at wire transfers in Minneapolis. The financial front lines are global.
That's honestly terrifying,
Yeah.
the scale of that. And finally, there was a brief but telling incident with infrastructure. A Fokker 50 crash landing in Mogadishu.
They're calling it a miracle landing, thankfully, no casualties. But it really highlights the fragility of the civilian infrastructure. You have these high-tech military jets sharing airspace with aging civilian planes that are barely airworthy. It's a reminder that while military capability is rushing ahead, the civilian side is still struggling to catch up.
Okay, so we've covered the military, the diplomacy, the institutional wins, the humanitarian crises. It's a lot. If we step back, what are the different decision makers actually trying to achieve here?
If we simplify it, you really have three distinct groups. First, the Somali government. Their focus right now is singular. Assert sovereignty against Somaliland's recognition and rebuild their army before the AU funding runs out.
Then you have the international players.
Right. The U.S., Turkey, Egypt, they are all competing for strategic influence. They want to keep shipping lanes open and terror groups contained, but they are jockeying for who gets to be the primary partner, who gets the keys to the kingdom.
And the third group.
The humanitarian agencies. And their perspective is the most urgent. They're warning that all these military gains mean absolutely nothing if the drought turns into a full-blown famine. You cannot stabilize a starving population.
So for our listeners using Stylo News to track this, what are the specific signposts they should be watching for in the next few weeks?
I would circle three things on the calendar. First, watch April 2026. That's when the Kenya-Somalia border at Mandera is set to reopen. Does it stay open? That'll be the litmus test for this whole normalization idea.
And the second?
The fallout from Israel's recognition of Somaliland. Does another country follow? If one more nation jumps on board, this diplomatic crisis could escalate very, very quickly.
And the third?
The rains, or the lack of them. If the seasonal rains fail again, the humanitarian crisis will likely overshadow everything else.
It is a region where the stakes are just incredibly high. Somalia is suddenly so important because it sits at the intersection of everything. Global trade routes, the war on terror, and the front lines of the climate crisis.
Precisely. It's not a sideshow. It's a central theater for the challenges we're facing in the mid-2020s.
Well, we will leave it there for today. We hope this deep dive has helped you connect some of the dots on what is happening in East Africa.
It is a complex picture, but it's a vital one to understand.
And as a reminder, the intelligence brief that powered today's discussion was generated by Stylo News.
Stylo News is a mobile and computer application that lets you create your own personal intelligence-style briefs from hundreds of traditional news sources and X. It's the consumer version of the tools used by intelligence professionals.
If you want to get AI-powered news on demand and start seeing these patterns for yourself, you can subscribe at www.stylonews.com.
And please, stay curious. The world is moving fast, and staying informed is really the best way to keep up.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have topics you'd like us to cover in future deep dives, let us know on social media. Follow Stylo News on your favorite platform. Until next time, stay informed.